glad to introduce our next keynote speaker, Alvin Wayne Graylin, who will talk about the impact of immersive advertising on humankind. How will the metaverse change our behavior as it reshapes our experiences? Alvin has been the China president at HTC, leading all aspects of Vive, VR, and smartphone businesses since 2016. Now, under his leadership, HTC has been voted as the top VR company in China at the World Conference of VR Industry for 3 of the last 4 years. And Graylin has been recognized by media and industry experts as the most influential person in XR in China for the last 5 years. He was born in China during the Cultural Revolution, educated in the US during the PC Revolution, played a significant role in fueling the internet and mobile revolution, and is now recognized as a top global thought leader for the coming metaverse revolution. Welcome, Alvin. Please take it away.
All right. Well, thanks for that nice intro. A lot to live up to. So first, I have to apologize for the slides because I had originally prepared the slides to be animated, so they would come out points at a time. Now they're all coming out. I guess there's no animations in these slides, so they're going to look very busy. So I apologize if they don't look as nice, and also some of the videos aren't working. So I'll talk through it. So today I'm going to talk more about immersive marketing, because I think marketing is going to be one of the very important aspects of the metaverse, and it's also one of the areas where it could be misused very easily. So it's important for us as safety advocates and industry players to really take a careful role in terms of how we approach it. Okay, next slide. So as everybody knows, metaverse is kind of associated with dystopian novels. And I think there's kind of a bad rap for metaverse because of all the stories. There's always a shitty real world, and then people escape to this virtual world. I think there's a real potential for us to make it the other way around, where by having a good open metaverse system, we can actually make our physical world better. So let's try to turn that upside down a little bit. Next slide. And I'm going to speak a little bit quickly. I'm going to speak a little bit quickly because we're going to be low on time. So I wanted to leave a little time for Q&A. So I think there are some major challenges that are being. It's been a lot of years, a little bit, but that hype creates a lot of over expectation and a lot of misunderstanding, and a lot of people are associating things with the metaverse that may or may not actually be relevant to the metaverse. As we become more dependent on a 3D immersive space, we're also going to need to be more conscious about the privacy and security aspects to make sure that we protect that data and protect our identity in these kind of spaces, because we're going to be essentially all parts of our world are going to be associated and dependent on it. There are people who are afraid that if we spend too much time in VR, that it could be bad for our physical health. Although we've actually found some recent studies that show maybe the opposite, that having VR actually makes you move around a lot more than you do with a keyboard and a mouse. And virtual worlds could be more addictive. So we've done studies that show that that is the case. So we need to kind of put in some guidelines and maybe some safeguards to make sure that the younger population who has less self-control don't run into those issues. Now, there are going to be a lot of disruption of the physical world and a lot of physical industries as we spend more and more of our time inside these virtual worlds. So I think it's important for us to get people prepared and get some of these industries prepared so that those displaced people aren't going to feel disenfranchised. There are now, I think, also an issue with the Web3, where the bad reputation associated with all of the antics on Web3 is now actually getting associated with the metaverse. And I feel like the Web3 trend and the metaverse trends are actually two completely different trends that are sometimes conflated. So it's important for us to educate people, to allow them to know that these two are actually different trends, and they're the bad actors that are happening in the crypto space are not really the same issues that we're going to run into. There's also right now a lack of international standards and a lack of common standards in general. So it's making the adoption a little bit slower. We also want to make sure that as this technology becomes more prevalent, that bad actors aren't using this technology covertly influence it, because that is a potential danger. And then there's, of course, there's a lot of unknowns that we will not know until we actually get there. So, next slide. Oh, this is a little bit different. So I think if you guys watched Ready Player One, remember when the Serrano, the bad guy, was talking about having 80% of our visual field in advertising. I think that's what a lot of people associate with VR advertising or metaverse advertising. I really hope we don't get there. That's not something we should try to do, right? Because it is not healthy and it's actually not effective. Next slide. Oh, I think we skipped one. Should be another slide in between. There should be in like a AR slide. No, okay. I guess we lost a slide. And metaverse, I want to give a very simple definition, because right now, if you read a lot of the press out there, there's definitions that are half a page long, and nobody's going to remember it. And there's so many different definitions. I wanted to give something that is very simple for us to understand. And really, the metaverse is not that complex. It's the internet that we've been building for the last 30 years, except now going from text and video and pictures to a 3D based metaverse or 3D based internet. Right. And it's going to be powered by AI, because that's almost all the content in right now can be enabled by AI. And the interface will be mostly through VR and AR. So I think that's the easy definition of what the metaverse is, so that at least we have a common ground. Next slide. And HTC's been playing a big role in this space, and one of the major players in providing the top tier devices. I'm not going to do a lot of advertising, so next slide. Now, this data actually just came out last week, and we had a survey with over 7,000 people in China, and here are the key barriers right now that are keeping the adoption of VR AR from happening faster. One is price. Even though the price has been coming down, it's still an issue for around 30% of people. And then the second one is the device form factors are just not ideal yet. Maybe a little too heavy, maybe a little too bulky, maybe the batteries aren't good enough, maybe somewhere with wires, etc. And then the lack of compelling content and use case. I think you put that together, that's the majority of the complaints. The good news is all of these issues are actually getting better, right? We've got the prices have been coming down significantly over the last few years. The form factors have gotten much smaller. If you look at our last slide, we essentially have almost glasses-like form factors, and the content is I think all of you guys know the content's getting much better. Next slide. So Marshall McLuhan once said, the medium is the message, and for a metaverse or XR type space, that's probably more true than any other medium, because when we're in that space, in that experience, that's actually what people are completely feeling. So the medium really is the message, and because next slide, and because this, oh, okay, and for the medium perspective, media has actually been changing significantly over the last 10 years. We've moved from a more PC-centric world to now a more mobile-centric world. Over the next 10 years, what we're going to have is to move to a more XR or metaverse-centric world, where most of our time will actually be spent in this kind of a medium versus the traditional 2D screen. Next slide. We're missing a slide. Okay. So here's a piece of data that might be interesting for you guys. And what we found was that in a XR or VR environment, your concentration is 6 times better than when you're watching a video. And that actually helps with learning. It helps people remember more. It helps people test better. It helps people understand more information. And it, even post tests, 2 weeks later tests will show that the results were better than the immediate test of the control group. Next slide. We also found that the for advertising, it's also significantly more effective. It gets people more interested. They view more often. They view longer, and then later on, they actually have more intent to follow up with it. 2 to 4x more interest. Keep going. Next slide. So I'm going very quickly. We can always do Q&A after if you need to. And some of the other tests are showing between 2 and 7x more effectiveness across different metrics, and a lot more retention. Several weeks later, you're still seeing 3 times more retention in terms of the messages of VR ads versus video or traditional 2D ads. Next. Now. For events like what we're doing today, what we also found was that over 2x in terms of the perception of understanding. When you ask people afterwards, are people understanding more? And they're really feeling like they understand the content a lot better when they're seeing it in a 3D environment, almost like being there. Right. And then they're more focused and they're also more willing to socialize amongst each other, where in a video type event, very few attendees will talk to each other. But in a virtual event like this, I'm sure all of you will actually be finding your friends either in the lobby area or here to listen and talk to each other. Next. And for influence itself, we actually did a recent study, and this one we need to be a little bit careful on. But we essentially did we mimicked AI NPCs, and we had children talking to little rabbits or little lions, and we had them give them suggestions in terms of how to behave at home, being more courteous, being more social, etc. And what we found was that the perceptions that were being the attitudinal changes that were being suggested became behavior changes at home. And so what we're finding is that there is that direct influence of ability for VR characters, whether real or NPC or people in there, to influence children. So, and we only did this study for children, but I think it'll be very similar for your friends in VR for adults as well. So we need to be careful in terms. This was teaching good habits, but it could also have been used to breed hate or separation, etc. Next. So I was mentioning about addictive nature of this medium, and anything that's more exciting, anything that's more immersive is going to be slightly more addictive. And what we're finding is that about 2x more addictive according to these different factors. And the good news is, even though it's more addictive, we did find there were ways for us to either create suggestions, where regular suggestions would come out during the gameplay to remind them to take a break, or we could use have parental guards, or we have system guards that essentially said you can't play more than 2 hours and it stops. And those actually, from the study, it found to be quite effective in terms of inducing the limitation of the addiction behavior. Next. Now, in terms of the health impact, as we spend more and more time in XR, a lot of people worried, is this going to be bad for my eyes? Is it going to be bad for my sleep? And the good news is, actually does not affect your sleep, at least based on the I think it was a 60-day study. And also on vision, these were users that every day they were spending 4 to 5 hours a day for 60 days. And their eyesight didn't change, their sleep patterns didn't change. In fact, their activity level went up. Essentially, they were getting about 4 to 5 hours of light exercise, like walking. So that would give us our kind of 10,000 steps much easier, where most people in the office get about 400 or 500 steps a day, which is not enough. Next. Now, in terms of making us more communicative, this is actually one of the benefits I think that a lot of people overlook. And what we find is that when you're in a XR environment, people will respond to strangers more. They will come up and talk to people they don't know more. So they're actually 4 times more communicative than they are on social network in your traditional medium. And if you want to get real attention, actually being a non-human animal will get you more attention than you would being a human. And of course, females will get more attention than males. So next. Now, one of the other positive studies that we recently done is that what we found is that if you do cultural exchange and virtual travel, that type of activity inside VR, it actually makes you appreciate that culture a lot more. Multi and, and I think that's actually quite encouraging because it means that, uh, you know, with all of the misunderstanding and the lack of global awareness of most people around the world, they kind of are very focused on their own little parts of the world. Having virtual experiences to allow you to go to other cultures, other places, can really, I think, bring the world a lot closer together. Next. So, as we can see, that this technology is very powerful, right? It's able to influence us to change our minds. It's able to make us, do things, be more active, etc., and talk to more people. So, there's a lot of good there, but there's also an opportunity for bad actors to misuse it. So, with any powerful technology, we also have a lot greater responsibility. So, as an industry, we really need to make sure we educate the world and also kind of watch out to prevent the bad actors from doing the wrong things. Next. So here's a few safety guidelines that I put together that I think might be helpful in terms of for marketing professionals to think about. One is really having full transparency. What data is advertising, what is real content. When you're in VR, it's sometimes hard to tell. Right? So let people know, gathering permission, making sure that you have permission to contact them, making sure you have permission to get their data before you actually use it, whether as a platform provider or as an advertiser. Limiting the data collection that you do have and then disposing of the collection of data that you don't need or don't have permission for. And then protecting the privacy once you do collect that data, because we're able to collect a lot more data than we had before. As you saw some of those earlier studies, we can see, eye tracking data, we have movement data, we have maybe camera data that shows environmental information, so a lot of that could be misused. So how do we protect the privacy of that data and ensure security so that that data that is stored doesn't get leaked out into the wrong hands? And then providing audience control or the user control so that they can come in and see what data you have, and then to be able to have the permission to delete that data that they don't want you to have anymore. Right. So I think having that ability to control their own data access and storage is very important. The other thing is to really be mindful of the experiences, because an XR immersive experience really leaves memories as if you've actually physically done it. So, it could leave traumatic effects if it's misused. So, a lot of people who go into horror VR, XR experiences actually can have some post-traumatic stress effects, right? So I really would advise for people not to overuse shocking things or horror things or things that might overly surprise or stimulate, particularly to young children who are not necessarily mature enough to separate reality from virtual yet. And then lastly is all of us need to make sure that either our clients, the platforms, whoever, are not using this technology to covertly manipulate any of its users. And I think it's very easy to do that because of all the data that we have, and to know what people look at, we instantly know what they're interested in. We may know what things to say, especially now with AI together, can really create an opportunity for misuse. So we really need to kind of watch and guard ourselves, and then also have a way to I guess create guardrails for the industry as a whole. Next slide. And so having an open metaverse is truly important. I know there are a lot of vendors out there trying to create some closed wall garden type solutions, but we just came out with that's from that same study I mentioned earlier with the 7,000 replies. What we did find was that the majority of users, 75% of users, actually do want an open metaverse. Even if we told them a closed metaverse will be more stable, it might have richer experiences. Would you rather have an open metaverse where you can use the same ID, same avatar, go across the multiple worlds, or would you rather go into one world and be having a better stable experience? And 75% of average users preferred the open world. Now, what was even also more interesting is that we had another group of people, what we call metaverse natives. These are people who essentially use VR every day and have their own device, have recently bought a VR device in the last year. And what they've said is that 85% of them prefer an open metaverse. So the people who I think know the best, who spent the most time in VR, they actually prefer an open metaverse. So I think that's something that we as an industry really need to be trying to spend more time to focus on. So instead of trying to create a closed world and try to take all of the value off the table, we really need to think about how do we collaborate together so all the worlds are interoperable. So all the worlds can use common IDs, common currencies, common avatars, and we allow people to jump around to wherever they need to be. Right, next slide. So, Vive has been working in this space, for the last 7, 8 years, really trying to create that open ecosystem. And, of course, you know us for our hardware, but we also have an open app store. We have, worked with the arts. We have this thing called Viveverse that essentially is a toolkit platform that allows for open metaverse content creation that is really focused on web XR type solutions so that anybody on any device, whether a flat screen device, or a T device or a immersive device can all go in there and be able to have a shared space, right? And we've got lots of other things we're doing. I'm not going to go into details. So next slide. So, recently I just came back from a trip to Singapore at the Asia Economic Forum there, and I was listening to global leaders. I was able to share a lot of discussions with them, and I found kind of 8 common trends. They all starts with D. It's actually kind of interesting, but the deglobalization is a major macro trend that's happening, and every country is starting to be more tribal, more nationalistic, and if we allow VR or metaverse type solutions to be more widely adopted, we might get people to understand each other more and stop and limit some of this deglobalization that actually is better for the world. The diversification, so companies themselves are now diversifying their supply chain so they're not relying on anybody. If we move to a more virtual economy, then there actually will be less need for physical objects to be created, to be used, to be bought that we only use very seldomly. So that actually could be better for supply chain because anything digital can be shipped around the world instantly. Disenfranchisement, I actually mentioned that earlier in terms of, as the world gets more automated, a lot of people are losing their jobs. A lot of people are feeling very risky. Things happening to my hand. So having having technology disenfranchise people, I think it is actually a real risk going forward because there will be hundreds of millions of people that will be automated out of work in the next 10 years. So how do we get them to stay relevant? And I think having a virtual economy, a virtual global economy, will give them a new purpose and new work opportunities that they didn't have before. The demographics of the world is changing. Some more mature worlds are essentially getting very much older, whereas the some of the emerging economies are getting much younger. There's a lot higher birth rates there, and then whereas the birth rates in mature countries are actually a negative population rate right now. So those things are going to change the way the population makeup is going to be, and how will elderly become more involved as they live longer? How do they stay interested even if they can't leave their home? Those are kind of things I think a broader, wider adoption of the metaverse type economy can actually help with. So digitization of everything is actually going to happen. It was first digitization of just more the music and then video and the web. Now it's essentially digitalization of our worlds and our the objects we have. The games we play, the entertainment that we have. So that actually will be accelerated by what we're doing today with the metaverse. The stratification, I think, is actually something that is quite hopeful because, as we all know, the rich is getting richer and relatively the poor is getting poorer. Where if we start having a more broader adoption of a virtualized economy, then anybody anywhere can have the opportunities of access that the mature markets can have. And that allows people to find work with companies around the world from anywhere, no matter where they were born, and to also get access to education from the highest and best institutions, no matter where they live. I think that's something that can make the world a lot better. The de-stupidization, I think, is also an interesting trend, where the world has actually gotten more stupid because of the things like TikTok or a lot of the video and program makes people look at these 5 minute, 5 second videos and just keep being numbingly fed by AI. I think we need to get people to experience longer form content, to go places, to talk to more people, and having a broader access to that instant global travel and instant global population. I think it's going to make the overall general population better. And then lastly, the decarbonization. I think everybody recognizes the global threat of global climate change, and if we use more virtual ways to communicate, to transport ourselves. Maybe we'll need smaller homes. We need to buy less goods. We need to transport less goods. It's going to make this problem a little bit less than before. Next. So I just want to end with. I'm actually very hopeful that we're living a very special time where all this technology is starting to mature. All the stuff that used to be in sci-fi novels are now actually all maturing at the same time, and that allows us to really create that utopian world that we've been looking for. That we dream about, but it also has a potential to create the dystopian things that are in these novels. So it's really up to us in terms of how do we apply this technology, how do we take the best out of technology and prevent and limit the risk. There's always going to be risk, but understanding there are risks will actually help us get ahead of them. So that's all I have. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm A. Raylan, and I think we have a couple minutes for questions.
We have maybe about 1 minute for one question. We do want to stop right at 40 minutes after the hour.
Okay.
Yes, and Alvin, do you have the information to post online? I saw the Twitter um, handle that
So
people
I
can
think
reach
you
you
can
at.
just add me on Twitter, A. Graylin, Agrayn, and Alvin Graylin. But any questions from you guys?
I think Larry has a
All right.
question. Larry, you.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yep. Sure.
Hi, I'm Larry Maggot. I'm actually giving a talk on Wednesday around safety for children. I wanted to get your input. Maybe it'll help me formulate my talk. In what ways you talked about some of the dangers of the metaverse? In what ways could the metaverse make us safer than traditional media, 2D media?
Well, versus traditional physical world, I mean, you're safer because you don't have to leave your home.
Yeah.
But I think that I don't know if it's safer than traditional media. I think it can be safer than physical interactions. But I mean, in terms of physical safety, you're going to be as safe as you are in on a 2D video, I guess. But
I
I
was
don't know
more
if I don't
thinking
know
about
if that's
compared
I don't know if when you
to
say
an
safety,
Instagram
what
or
specific concern are you
well,
worried
for
about?
example, as you know, there are issues when you're on Instagram or TikTok of bullying, of harassment, and I'm
Yeah,
wondering
okay.
whether the immersive nature of it could actually create more empathy and decrease some of the negatives that we see on traditional social media.
Yeah, so actually that is one point I do want to it's a great question. And what we found is that uh, in a place where you have a real identity and real embodiment, people will tend to behave more like they do in the physical world. You're not going to go up to somebody and bully them and flame them for just random thoughts on social media, like you do on kind of anonymous social media. Where in a metaverse environment, you have a name on top of you. You have an identity that follows you across worlds. So you really have a reputation you want to maintain. And I think that's something that actually will make us better people in terms of how we behave towards each other. And we see that in social networks in China, where we actually use real identity to link to social media accounts because everything is tied to your national ID. And you really don't have an issue of that bullying that you see in some of the Twitter or other types of more anonymous social media. So that's
Yes,
an
and in
excellent point.
interest of time, thank you so much for engaging the audience and for all that are still here. Let's
No
give some
problem.
accolades for Alvin as we close this conversation. We will take a quick
All right.
4 to 5 minute break and return here a little about 11:45. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.